Hey everybody, today we are going to dive into part 2 of the foodmood app build. So we've already got our user accounts set up where you can add connections with a unique friend code. Now what we want to do is take things a step further, and we actually want to build out the functionality to interact with your connection. So that's what we're going to do, and we'll dive in right now. All right, so I've already added another database to this app. I called it food types, and it's got two simple fields. It has the name field, of course, and then it has a text field for the image URL. So we're going to use this image for the deck swiper component, which I will show you in a little bit. So I've already filled out several different food types with images that can go with them. Okay, so that is a pretty simple database setup. But what we want to do to make this work is we actually want to create another collection. So I'm going to click Add Collection and just call this Sessions. So let me explain some of my thought behind this. We could build this out where as people are going through a list of food types, they are adding those food types as preferences to their own profile. So say I go through and say I like burgers and pizza, then that stays with me. That's like a Parker is tied to this burgers and pizza. And it's kind of hard to reset those, especially when we don't know what all the food types we're going to have. If it were, for example, one option, like we're going to say whether or not I am in the mood to go out or am in the mood to cook at home, those are pretty well going to stay the same. So I could just tie those into a profile, make a couple true or false fields in the user's collection, and adjust those as I'm interacting with the app. But this is a little more complex because we've got 12 records already, and we'll probably add to it in the future. So we don't want these all to be fields in a user profile that we have to go through and reset every time they're done connecting with somebody. Because remember, this is only going to last for one session. When I'm interacting with my connection, once we've picked something, it needs to reset. We don't want to adjust the profile for the rest of my time as an app user. So every time I go in to create a new session, I need to have a blank slate. All the options are on the table, and I go through and narrow them down. So we'll start building this out, but wanted to give a little background into why we're creating this third collection. So the third collection called Sessions, we'll just leave the default name. I think that is perfect. All right, now we need to add a relationship to users. So we'll click Add Property, go down to Relationship, choose Users. And in this case, what I want is for one user to be able to have multiple sessions, but the sessions to belong to one user. So I'll choose this, but I'm actually going to name it User 1 because I want to add 2 user slots to each session. That's because I want to keep track of who is starting the session and who is joining the session. So let me show you over here in my other collection in users. You'll see there's automatically a relationship to sessions here. Now this could start getting really confusing really fast if I just kept adding my second relationship, because what happens is every time I add a relationship in the other collection, there's a unnamed field. So it just takes on the name of the collection we're relating from. In this case, it's sessions. So we don't want multiple instances where it just says sessions, sessions, sessions for however many times we're going to link here. So I'm going to go ahead and take the opportunity to name this. That way, later on when I'm working through filters and things like that, it's a lot easier to keep track of what's going on. So I'm going to call this session started because the person starting the session is going to be the one that I assign to user 1. And then we'll add another relationship to users, the same relationship type, and we'll call it user 2. And then let's rename this as well, and we'll just call this sessions joined. Okay, great. So we've got a relationship now between our sessions and our users. Another thing we want to do is add a relationship to our food types. And in this scenario, we want to make sure a session can have multiple food types, but we also want to go ahead and make sure that a food type can have multiple sessions to link to. So we'll do the many-to-many option, click done on that. And then we can leave the default food types, and I think sessions is fine there too. So that is all good. Okay, so now we need a way for the user to interact with this data that we've set up. I'm kind of thinking right now what we'll do is we'll just link to a new screen off of this list of connections. So first of all, I need to get my new screen set up and ready to go. I'm just going to take this profile screen and copy it over by holding down Option or Alt and clicking and dragging. And we'll rename it. It's Profile 2 right now. Let's call this screen New Session. Just like that. And then we will change also the title to What's Your Mood? And then we can go ahead and delete the content that we had here for the profile screen. Okay, I think that looks good. So next, let's add the deck swiper component so we can actually put this list of food types in front of the user. That way they can start noting their preferences. So the deck swiper component is a marketplace component. You can click on Explore Marketplace and go find it and install it. I've got it right here, so I'm going to click it and just click onto the app to add it. And that's what it looks like by default. So it is styled, which is nice. Kind of looks like a stack of cards. As you swipe through them, they'll go down through the layers until you get to the very end. So I'm going to just go through the options here to set this up. It asks what this is a deck of. I'm going to choose food types. We're going to look at all the food types. We'll sort A to Z. And then let's see, for the image, we want to use a URL. We can use magic text here to just grab it from the current food type. And then later on, when we're working on the design, we could worry about some of these like placeholder images in case there isn't one available. I think the card title is correct, so that looks great. And this all looks good. So next we want to set up our left and right swipe styles. So if we slide to the left, which is a no, right now it just says nope, which I think works just fine. It has a default color of black. I'm actually going to change this to kind of a red color to accentuate the option that you're going with. And then for the right swipe, which is going to be our yes, let's change it to yup and give it a green. Okay. And then on the end of deck, what we're going to want to do is link to a new screen because we're going to actually want to go look at the results. So let's do this. Let's just copy this over and call it results. We can change the title too. Oops, I can learn to spell. Okay, and I'm going to delete the deck swiper. And this is just so we can go down and add at the end of the deck an action that links to results. Okay, great. Now we need to set up our actions for swiping left or right on this deck swiper. So for the left, that was our no action. What we want to do when somebody is saying no, they're not interested in a food, is nothing. Because what we're doing here is we're actually going to add the options to a new relationship field. I'm just going to show you in the database so you remember here in sessions, we added a relationship to food types. So anytime someone says yes, they're interested, we're going to add that food type to this field in the current session. So that's why we've got the third collection, because we're just tracking the food types that each party is interested in one session. And then at the end of it, if they want to do it again, it'll make a whole new session and start from scratch, which I think is going to be a better experience for everyone. So that's why I've set it up this way. Let's go into the action now and actually make it happen. Before I can add the action that adds the food type to the current session, you'll notice I can't really update a session here. I don't have any options. And that's because right now there is no data for a session being tied into the screen. You can see it by going to the screen settings and looking down at available data and seeing that there's no linked data. So what we need to do next is when somebody taps on a name here, we need to create a session to work from. Okay, so on this list, this is going to be pretty easy. Actually, I'm on the wrong list. I'm going to do it off the home page. I'm going to scoot my screen over too, just so that is a little clearer. And we're just going to drop this below. Okay, so on the home screen on the list of connections, we said what we wanted to happen is when you tap one of these, it starts a session with that person. So on click, we're going to create a session. And here's where we can add a name. I'm just going to do the date here. I'm going to do the current time as the name because this is not going to be a visible name. And then for user 1, we're going to set this to the logged in user. User 2, we'll set it to the current user. Remember, current is just referring to whichever one we're tapping on. Okay, so this is going to create our session. And then what we want to do is link to the new session screen. And we can add a transition here. And I'll just show you after we go back into new session and look at the available data, we now have the current session and the current user. Both are passed through to this screen, which is what we want. Okay, so we've got our deck swiper. Now we can add our action. For the right swipe, we're going to update the current session. And what we're going to do is we're going to add the current food type. So whichever one they're swiping on, we are adding it here to the list on the current session. Okay, so that is pretty simple, right? But when you think about two people contributing to this list, they're both going to go to the same screen. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense because if person A says that they want burgers, right? They want burgers or tacos. And person B says they want burgers or sushi. Then burgers, tacos, and sushi are all going to be on the list because we've only got the action set up to add things no matter what. It's going to get added to the custom field, or we're calling it a list, but it's really it's a custom field in the sessions list. So here's what we can do. We can go back into the database and we can look at this sessions and we can add a couple more fields. So we've got food types. Let's rename this to mutual food types. Okay, and we've got food types with sessions here. Let's call this sessions mutual food types. Okay, let's add a property, a relationship to sessions. We're in, oh, I'm sorry. Nope, we want a relationship to food types. Here we go. And we want a multi-relationship here. And we're going to call this user 1 foods. We'll go back to food types. Make sure this is noted. Okay, let's add another relationship to food types. We'll call this user 2 foods. And in the reciprocal, we'll just make sure to note which one that is. All right, cool. So now what we can do is in the actions down here, instead of just adding to the mutual food types, we're gonna get rid of this. What we'll do is we will update the current session, and for user 1, we'll add the current food type, and we want a condition on this where this only happens if the logged in user is equal to the current session user 1. So we're only adding the food to user 1 foods if the logged in user is user 1. And then let's add another action. Let's update the current session. And let's do user 2 foods. So we're going to add the current food type to user 2 foods. But the same thing, we're only going to do it if the logged in user is equal to the current session user 2. Okay, so we see with these two actions right now, we're adding to almost like two separate lists. We've got user 1 foods and user 2 foods, and we're only adding to those lists if the logged in user is in the correct slot. So we're matching user 2, their foods go to user 2 foods, and user 1, their foods only go to the user 1 foods. Okay, now let's do another action. We're going to update the current session, and we're going to add the mutual food types. And let's only do this under the circumstance that the current session user 1 foods, so we're looking at the user 1 foods list, contains the current food type. So this means that if we're going through and, we've got these actions all set up, we've said yes to a food, it's going to check the user 1 foods list and only add it to the mutual foods list if it already exists in user 1. And then let's do the same thing for the user 2 list. So we're going to update the current session. We're going to add the current food type to mutual food types if the current session user 2 foods contains the current food type. So it's a lot of actions to get this to work this way, but it should mean that as two people are swiping through here and, going left for no, right for yes, it's going to be checking against the current list and only adding to mutual food type if the other person has added it to their own food list. So that way, if I say I like tacos and burgers and sushi, and this other person says I like pizza, burgers, and sushi, we're only going to see burgers and sushi when we get down to filtering this mutual foods list from our session, because when tacos or pizza, I believe were the examples I used of being not a mutual food match, were swiped yes, the conditions weren't met for them to be added to mutual foods. Okay, so let's pull this together now. We've got the new session that links to results. Under results, let's just add a list. I'm going to copy one from up here and we'll just tweak it a little bit. So we want this, first of all, to be always visible. We're going to make this a list of food types. And then we're also going to filter this by the current session mutual food types. And we can sort A to Z too. Okay, we also want to adjust the title. Actually, no, the title's right. We do want to adjust the left section. Instead of an avatar, let's do an image. We'll get it from the image URL. Okay, and then the right section, we can just leave that off for now. All right, excellent. For this back button though, I actually want it to link directly home. So what I need to do is edit the left icon. There we go. And instead of linking back, we want to link to the home screen. And we can just do a slide down for that. Okay. So in theory, this all works. But let's test it and see what it looks like. All right. So I've got users already set up. I've got 3 test accounts. They've got the same password. I've got unique codes that are really easy to remember. Those are all good. And then, of course, we've got our food types all ready to go. So I'm just going to hit preview here. And I'm not sure which one I'm signed in as. So I'm going to log out and I'm going to do this. Let's do test1, test.com. I highly recommend using just password or something you can remember for all your test accounts. That way you can log in as a test account really easily. So let's add a new connection. Already had something typed in. We'll do the 222 one. Okay, click plus. Is it adding? I should double check that because I was thinking that it linked back after adding. So we'll update the current user. Add the current user, and then link back. Should have linked back. Let's see if it added the connection. Oh, not them. It did not. Okay, so my actions don't seem to be working here. I'm going to just recreate those really quick. Okay, let's see if this fixed it. There we go. Okay, working again. I think it might have been because I copied the app at one point. But anyways, now we've got our connection here. So I'm going to tap this to start a new session. We've got our deck swiper, which is great. You can see if I go left, I get the nope. Right, I get the up. So I'm just going to say yes to everything but Italian. Nothing against Italian, I love it, but we're just going to say yes to everything else. Let's say Italian and sushi. I think I can remember that, and we'll say yes to everything else. Okay, cool. And then it goes to this results screen, which right now is blank. That is expected, but let's go ahead and hop out of the preview, and I want to log in as the other account now. So I want to do test 2. Oh, you know what? As I'm testing this, I just realized there's not a way for me to join that same session. If I just tapped on the connection name, it would try to make a new session entirely. So let's just really quickly, I'm going to move this down out of the way and make my home screen a little longer here. I'm just going to make a new list down here and call it sessions. So it's just a list of sessions, and then we want it to be where the logged in user is under user 2 right now. We can tweak this later on, but let's get rid of that action. And what we're going to do is link to the new session screen, which is perfect. And let's see, do we need to do anything else? Oh, let's add a new header. So list header, we'll do sessions. Oh, and session name is just going to have a timestamp right now. I think that's okay though. So let's hit preview. Let's log in as test 2. And perfect. So I've got my session down here. I'm just going to join it. And then let's say no to like most things, but keep a few. We're going to say yes to Italian, but no to a lot of other things. So there shouldn't be a ton of matches here. Hey, okay, great. So we've got Chinese, Indian, and seafood. That seems right. It seems like the 3 that I mutually said yes on. So that's perfect. The app is definitely working. And that is how you put together a session and then put together some sort of matching mechanism to get something like this to work. Hopefully this was helpful, and I would love to help if you run into any issues. Thanks.